Hello there. So I've got my little Christmas tree set up because I'm recording this on Boxing Day. This is technically a Christmas video that I'm recording a day later. I'll probably release a day after this. Basically, this is just a simple video that I want to make for me. It is a Christmas present to myself. It's not even related to Christmas at all. Like I got some decent stuff for Christmas. Nice coasters and stuff. Very swag, very cool. But really I'm here to talk about my favourite comic of all time, because I just felt like it, because I looked over my collection and was like, yeah, I got quite a lot. So my favourite comic of all time is Generation X. Basically every decade other than the 70s has some team of young mutants. The 60s is the original X-Men. In the 80s and the 2000s it was the New Mutants, and for the 90s it was Generation X. You might recognise some of these characters. It's a team led by Emma Frost and Banshee, and then you got good old Jubilee down there from the 90s cartoon. Very nice, very swag, very cool team of cool dudes. I don't have a particular point with this video, I just want to talk about Generation X. It was one of the first comics I read back when I was, finding out that you could read comics online in certain places. It's one you don't see people really talk about as much. The New Mutants are obviously the most famous young mutant team because they were the first of the spin-off type. But Generation X, it's not like the edgy alternative as you would expect from the era and potentially the name. Although there's some dark subject matter, particularly relating to Chamber down here, my personal favourite X-Men of all time. I don't know, maybe it's just something about a moody teen from the UK in this book I was reading when I was a moody teen from the UK that I really relate to. And the fact that his power is really visually very cool. Fortunately for me, it's one of those rare cases where my favourite character happens to get a lot of focus. That doesn't usually happen. I'll look at my favourite characters in Persona, they tend to get overlooked because the Japanese have shit. Anyway, I make the joke too often. So I've been collecting as much Generation X stuff as I can. So this is the first volume of Generation X Classic. This is not the one you go for. This is years old, and Generation X Classic only ever got 2 volumes. What I was surprised by was that Generation X Classics Volume 1 isn't just the first so many issues of Generation X. It actually covers a selection of issues from X-Men books prior to this, because Generation X had a small arc as part of the Phalanx Covenant story that introduces most of the characters and sets up the book. And that was all included in here. So this actually only goes up to the end of issue 4, but it's still pretty lengthy, and yeah, there's a good old chamber on the spine, very good. Volume 2 picks up not from there, however. See, this is the funny thing, is this only covers the mainline, the mainstream Generation X stuff, because 4 issues in, a certain major 90s storyline took place. That's not in here. Fortunately, they did make a trade of Generation X. The cover is literally impossible to see on video. It's basically just a gold rendition of what I think is the cover of Generation Next Volume 1. Basically, Generation Next is the Age of Apocalypse version of Generation X that lasted 4 issues. It was very unfortunate timing that we're only 4 issues in, and 2 of our team members, Chamber and Penance, have just been introduced. Chamber had appeared in 4 comic issues at the time Generation Next started. Penance had appeared in 3. She debuts in issue 2. Chamber is barely in one of those middle issues and barely in the 4th one. And Penance is barely in the 4th one. How do we do an alternate version of Chamber when we barely know who he is in the main timeline? His face doesn't explode. That's the difference. You have to get that separately. I don't know why it's not in here. I don't know of any Generation X collection that has them. I'm honestly surprised they even did Generation X Classic at all. And what surprised me even more was the fact that they've been doing these new ones, the Epic collections that they've been doing for the last 3 years. Volume 1 came out in 2021, Volume 2 came out in 2022, and Volume 3 came out just a few months ago, 2023. So there'll probably be a 4th one next year. So these all together cover up to issue 32. But it's not just Generation X, because Volume 1, of course, also features all that backstory stuff I mentioned last time, plus extra stuff. It mentions how it has Wolverine number 94, Generation X Collector's Preview, and Generation X Ashcan Edition, which are these like promotional things, I think, that came out around the time. And then Volume 2, it's got the San Diego Preview, the 95 and 96 annuals, even material from Incredible Hulk Annual 97. So I guess Generation X cameoed there, or had a role in a small story, and they just threw that in as well. X-Men Unlimited, Marvel Team team up #1, which I think was, I don't think it's the original Marvel team up, I think it was like the second volume where they team up with Spider-Man, because Marvel team up is just Spider-Man team up. Even when the Ultimate Marvel team up was made, it was all Spider-Man focused. I remember that one, Generation X, 3 of the members team up with Spider-Man to fight the Circus of Crime. It's a fun little story. And so you get all sorts of random issues. The question is, how long will this go on for? Will it go into the post-Gen X stuff? Will it include the Chamber miniseries? I don't know. But it's wild that they have these, and there are hundreds of pages long, and this is the one to go for. Not only because they didn't continue making the classic collection, but also because you're just getting more in these. Of course, they're also more current. I can't say exactly what it is that makes me love Generation X so much, but I have become somewhat obsessive with it to where I've been collecting as much of the Generation X stuff as I can. But Generation X, not only does it introduce my favourite X-Men of all time, it also was the time period in which Emma Frost was at her best. Like, there's a reason I have this Emma Frost. It's not just because she's a sexy blonde lady, it's because she is a fantastic character, and Generation X is a core part of that. At the time, she was a villain. She was one of the antagonists in the Dark Phoenix saga. She was basically the Magneto to Magneto's New Mutants. Generation X was when her redemption really began and paved the way for what would come later. And unfortunately, when she made her way over into the mainline X books, it was during, I think, Grant Morrison's run, that weird period where they're trying to emulate the movies, and Scott and Emma had a psychic affair, and Scott's like, it doesn't count, it's not physical, it's in our minds. And it's like, that's a terrible excuse. And Scott and Emma were never a good couple in the first place. No. Sean and Emma, Banshee and Emma, that's the real OTP. If you disagree, you're an idiot. I'm not sure what exactly Counter X is, but it's basically, these ones cover some of the later issues. This one covers 71 to 75 and some extra material from like X-Men Unlimited. And this one covers... Wait, Warren Ellis wrote this? Damn. This one covers 63 to 70. These are some of the last issues of the book. In fact, I think it doesn't quite cover the ending of the series, but it's got most of the stuff in there. The way the series ended was kind of weird and random, but at least it did actually get to have an ending and didn't just stop, and then the characters just start showing up in other books, and it's like, oh yeah, that just ended off panel. So this is actually just a standalone issue 45. The story for this is funny because I mentioned New Mutants before. The 2000 New Mutants is one of my other favourite comics of all time. And I was ordering the trades of that, and I got them off eBay. And the person who sold it just threw in a few random issues of other comics. And not only did it happen to be a random Generation X issue, my actual favourite comic series of all time, I assume they threw it in because it's like Generation X, New Mutants. If you like New Mutants, you probably like Generation X and vice versa. But it also happens to be my specific favourite issue, because this is the one that comes at the end of a particular arc where all the psychics lose their powers. And so obviously that affects Emma Frost and also Chamber because he's a telepath. And so they lose their psychic powers, and Chamber can't speak without his telepathy because he has no mouth and he must scream. It's just crazy. By chance, by sheer coincidence, this person who doesn't know me sees that I'm buying New Mutants from them, and they're like, I'm going to throw in Generation X. And it's the best issue they could possibly have picked for me. Mental. I love that. It's wild. I have Generation M. Now this isn't fully illustrative of why. Here we go. Chamber was the focus of the first issue. This is about a bunch of mutants who lost their powers on M-Day, when the whole decimation thing started. Chamber loses his powers, he doesn't have organs or a lower jaw, he's just got a crater in his body, and somehow he lives. I actually mentioned this recently in the green screen readings on a bunch of wasted potentials that never got made. I do have a Chamber wasted potential I want to make at some point. Maybe we'll get to that someday. And this new Excalibur. So this is just another fun book, but the problem is, it was being written by Chris Claremont, and he apparently got ill during the middle third, and so other writers just came in and just did whatever. But one of the issues of this is the fallout of Generation M, what happened to Chamber, and bridges the gap between him appearing in Decimation M and then showing up in New Warriors with Jubilee. New Warriors Volume 4 was pretty cool. It was a bunch of depowered mutants using tech in place of superpowers. Chamber and Jubilee were both part of that. It had a very unceremonious end when they, just like everyone else in the tie-ins, got beaten up by the Hulk during World War Hulk. Chamber's next big appearance was showing up in Age of X, this altered timeline. Not alternate timeline, altered timeline from the main one, in which the Avengers are bad guys and they're hunting mutants, and Chamber just fucking blows Ghost Rider's head off and steals his bike. And I'm like... Ooh, that's very, very good. I like that. He just nicks his bike. It's well good. Then I have this random issue I just saw, I think it was in W.H. Smith's, Essential X-Men. I saw this, I was like, hang on, is that Generation X fighting the time-displaced original X-Men? Yes, it is. I forget the specific explanation for it. I think it's not actually Generation X or it's some weird altered timeline or something. But I was like, that's neat. Because Generation X characters were not treated well after the book ended. The Skin died, Jubilee got depowered and became a vampire and adopted a child. Oh, that was pretty good. Jono had it rough. Husk went insane. Not many people had a good time. Least of all me. Generation X Volume 2. Ignore this cover, Husk barely does anything. It's basically about a new team being led by Jubilee. It's like New Mutants Volume 2. A similar concept, but they're being mentored by one of the originals. So Jubilee's training this Generation X, and unfortunately one of those characters is Quentin fucking Quire, and I don't like Quentin fucking Quire. He's a cunt. I think that's the weird deer girl who did a murder because a turtle choked on plastic or something. Like you don't do a murder over something like that. Comics are dumb, and most comic writers are also dumb, and they're the reason comics are dumb. But comics being dumb also makes them dumb because they grew up on dumb comics. Anyway, I got the suspicion that the series ended because it's like, here's our antagonist. We're bringing in one of the characters from the original series, now possessed. She's the threat. It's like, okay, that's our establishing arc. Then we get just this other story, not really related to what's going on. And then, all of a sudden, at the end of Volume 2, now we have to have the final confrontation and wrap this up. I guess the book just wasn't selling well. What was really weird was that this was releasing at the same time as XMen 92. Oh, that's the trade. That's the 92 trade. That's not actually relevant to this. But the actual X-Men 92 series, based on the X-Men cartoon, which is now getting a sequel in X-Men 97. See, 92 is when it started, 97 was when it ended. This is relevant for two reasons. One is that the first arc has the X-Men fighting Dracula's son. Jubilee gets turned into a vampire. Also, Chamber is introduced. I think actually it's introduced in this original trade. That was part of Secret Wars. He and Jubilee are getting close together. They go on a date. They're becoming a couple. Oh, that's cute. Other Generation X characters cameo in this, including the same character who was possessed in Volume 2, absorbing stuff from people, basically a vampire. That's unusual. How funny. This series ended abruptly after 2 volumes, suddenly wrapped up its plot because maybe it wasn't selling that well. Chamber and Jubilee get together in this as well. I was like, are these things connected? By the same creative teams? No, it's completely different people. It's just a weird thing that around the same time these 2 books both came out with a lot of focus on Generation X and 90s X-Men nostalgia with evil vampires. Like I said, the character who is possessed in Generation X Volume 2 is turned into a vampire thrall in X-Men 92. I don't know why that is the case. It's a weird coincidence. The same ideas are happening all over the place. Very strange. New Mutants, Volume 4, I think. Because Volume 1's the originals, Volume 2 is the 2000s New Generation, Volume 3 is a reunion of the originals, Volume 4 is just a book. I guess they put it out because the film was coming out. Chamber is here, and so is Mondo, but no one gives a shit about Mondo, so let's move on. I thought, yo, that's where Chamber ended up. There are 2 issues. One, this is that weird era. Yeah, the Jonathan Hickman era of X-Men. I don't like that era. I don't like the weird hippie sex commune type feel it has. It feels very cultish, the X-Men. I don't like it. Fortunately, there's less of that because the team go into space, but the story itself is kind of boring. And also, because it's mostly the original New Mutants with a couple of the Generation X's. The Generation X's are treated like these young bucks compared to the established veterans. And so the book kind of talks down to them, and then they kind of get shuffled off to focus on these other characters. And I'm like, I remember that guy in New Mutants, and I know Armor, and I think that's Boom Boom. And it's like, oh, this is just not what I'm looking for. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. These are both listed as Volume 1. The issues chosen are weird. I guess it was jumping all over the place. This one has issues 1, 2, 5, and 7. One has 3, 4, 6, 8 to 12. Because it's 2 different plot lines between issues, which is just a silly thing. And this thing being done the way it was shows how silly that was. I don't like it. It's very silly, very strange. Comics are dumb. Don't get into comics. But do read the original Generation X. Volume 2 is pretty good, although you'll need a bit of context for the stuff that's happened in between. None of Chamber's stuff that happened in between matters at all. You can go from the end of Volume 1 to 2 and miss nothing, basically. And that's why I had a wasted potential plan, because all the stuff that happens to my favourite X-Man for a solid decade, I think it's like 15, 16 years, actually, like a decade and a half, didn't matter in the slightest. It all just gets undone unceremoniously at the end of Age of X, and he's barely had a presence. Like, one of his most significant moments was, apparently in one comic, he gets, erased from reality, and then gets brought back by the end of it, because he's, protecting his students. That's something I like. I like when younger X-Men go on to become teachers at Xavier schools. In Generation X Volume 2, Kitty Pryde is the headmistress of this school in Central Park. I don't know what that particular era of X-Men was about. She maintained discipline and order by taking off her shoe, phasing her foot into Quentin Quire's crotch, and threatening to unphase and destroy his penis. I know, you feel like you guys got fucking flashbanged by this revelation. Like I said, comics are dumb, and yeah, so I like when these characters go on to become teachers, to teach younger mutants. And that's something that I think that this New Mutant thing would have been better focused on, like Generation X Volume 2 was, because it's about Jubilee and Chamber teaching, and I'm pretty sure Chamber's specific specialty is in dealing with physical mutations, because obviously, you know, when his power first manifested, it blew open his chest. Fortunately, his power is able to keep him alive as well, and he has telepathy so he can still speak to people, but still, he has to live with this. It's kind of funny actually because Skin has grey skin, and the comic kind of treats it as if he has an easier time fitting in than Chamber does. It feels like it's more of a mindset thing because he's like the Nightcrawler-esque funny man, whereas Jono is the almost Wolverine-esque loner. So I guess loneliness is a mindset. Yeah, you don't fit with society. Just try, and it'll all work out. I mean, you can even lie. So, oh, yo, get away from me, mutie. Don't save my life. Bro, I'm not a mutant. I have grey skin because I was bitten by a radioactive elephant. Oh, that's okay then. That's a real exchange from a real Generation X comic. I love it. There are also novels of Generation X. Be me. Record for 20 minutes, think, yeah, that's a good length. It's time to start wrapping this up. Remember, I have the Generation X, I have 2 of the 3 novels, and then go up to get them, and realise there's a bunch of other stuff you missed from your collection. Like, I do have a volume of New Warriors. See, there's... Jono is not on the cover. I do like the bit where Wolverine sees on the screen a picture of Wanderer. I guess he recognised the eyes. Immediately he's like, that's Jubilee. I can tell, because she was my sidekick. I do have a volume of New Warriors, I forgot about it, but it's in my collection. So these novels, I've not even taken the barcode off, but yes, you have Crossroads and just Generation X. Now what's interesting about Generation X, I don't know anything about the Crossroads. Generation X is actually written by Scott Lobdell, the original writer for Generation X for the first few years. I think he's still the writer up to the end of Volume 3, Back to School, of the Epic Collection. I think he's still writing by that point, and he wrote this book. There is an audiobook version you can get on Audible. I started listening to it. One issue comes up is that it's focused on Chamber. There's actually a later annual that adapts the story and makes a few changes. Like, apparently he has a jetpack in this. Got rid of that in the annual. The book describes how Jono grew up in Scotland. No, he didn't. He's from London. He's not Scottish. What are you... Unless he's supposed to be from Scotland and, like, he's just never written that way. I mean, they go out the way to write Banshee's accent in, so I don't know why they wouldn't write Jono's in that way. I mean, granted, the way I always read it, Jono kind of read more like he's northern. Although, I guess it would explain why there's that one bit in one of the issues where the origin of kilt is inaccurately stated by Sync and Jono corrects him. I guess he would know. I guess he would know whether kilts originated in Scotland or Ireland. But then I remembered, oh yeah, I've also got these. The Gen 13 crossover. So Gen 13 is this other teen superhero comic from the 90s. I don't know that much about Gen 13. I've read a couple of issues, but they did 2 crossovers. Gen 13 Generation X and Generation X Gen 13. I think it's because both are like generation in the title. All I really know about Gen 13 after this period is that Caitlin Fairchild, she's in the DC universe because DC bought the company at some point and then with New 52 folded it into the DC main multiverse. And so she's part of the New 52. And that's all I know. But there is another connection between DC and Generation X. Amalgam Comics. I completely forgot I had this. Generation Hex. So, if you don't know, Amalgam Comics, which I wanted to do a Wasted Potential on as well, it was the aftermath of the first big Marvel and DC crossover, DC versus Marvel, Marvel versus DC. But not the aftermath, it was like 6 issues, and then after issue 5, the 2 universes merge, and so then there's all these one-shots of amalgamated characters. So like Wolverine and Batman are Dark Claw. Captain America and Superman are Super Soldier. There are certain characters who appear twice, like Dark Claw and Bruce Wayne are separate. Storm is Wonder Woman, but Diana Prince also exists. But this is Generation X combined with Jonah Hex. With Chamber being Jonathan Jono Starsmore, he is now Jono Hex. And so all the other Generation X characters, like you got Emma and Skin, they're all combined with various characters from Jonah Hex. I'm not familiar with Jonah Hex, to be honest. And yeah, so you go from Jonah Hex being this cowboy with like a gnarly melted face a bit to, oh, a cowboy without a lower jaw. So this is the true Chamber Ghost Rider. And that's great. I've not even read this. I just have it in my collection. I think I found it on eBay and bought it because it's like, well, I want that. I want more Generation X content. And unfortunately, adaptations don't do them well. I think M showed up in like one animated series. I think she had a cameo in like Wolverine the X-Men once. Then Husk cameoed before she was even Husk in the 90s cartoon, because the Guthries are one of those recurring bits in a lot of the early X-Men spin-off teen books. This is this big farming family from Kentucky, and like 5 of the kids are mutants. So like they would just be one in each team. It was pretty funny. They could make their own team book out of them. You really could. You got like a decent selection of different powers. The only proper adaptation of Generation X was that TV movie that didn't even have Chamber or Husk in it because the powers were too expensive. But instead of being like, well, let's have like fire breath as an alternative for Chamber, and like Husk can like shapeshift into different materials instead of husking. We just replaced them with like some dude with super strength and some girl with some other powers, and it's like, that's bad. And then Jubilee's white, and that's bad. And like Emma shows up and she's got like a blonde wig, and that's bad. If you want to hear more about this amazingly terrible TV movie, go and watch, I believe his name is Nandov Films, Nando versus Movies, something like that. He's just some obscure channel, you probably never heard of him. Doing fan castings, like he did Generation X characters. It was just, he was talking about a young mutant team and just threw in a few Gen X characters. He likes Generation X. He's very based, go check him out. And Emma tends to get the shaft in adaptations as well, because she's either just a villain, or she will actually get to be one of the good guys, and her entire backstory as a villain is just kind of mentioned, causes a bit of tension with characters like Wolverine and Storm, and that's it. She's otherwise just a good guy. They don't really delve into how she redeemed herself, how she, basically through Generation X, she was able to be the teacher that she failed to be for the Hellions. Generation X is an important part of Emma Frost's story, and the adaptations never do it justice. So there's certain story arcs in comics that will just never be done justice. Like, you'll never get a good Red Hood story that actually tells the story of Jason Todd as Robin. He'll either be, he's already dead and gone, and then he comes back as the Red Hood, or he's already the Red Hood now, and all this stuff is backstory. Because a lot of this stuff requires such long-term planning. Maybe a TV show could pull it off, but they're never interested in doing that, unfortunately. Emma deserves that, and having her good old team here, Jono, Paige, Monet, Everett, and Angelo, Folkmondo. Don't forget Penance. With her team, and Sean, of course, by her side, helping her out. They can do a lot. I should get the Emma Frost miniseries. I remember reading that when I was younger, and it's like, oh yeah, Emma Frost is naturally a brunette. And her brunette sister who hates her, they have like a Nina and Anna dynamic. She's actually blonde. They swapped her colours. I think Emma fucked her teacher, and eventually Emma just pulls a gun and just shoots her sister dead. It's amazing. That's not in that series, that's in Generation X. But anyway, I definitely recommend picking up these new Epic collections, because they actually... Don't fall. What are you doing to me? So I definitely recommend checking out the Epic collections of Generation X. Volumes 1, 2, and 3. You get there's a lot in there. If you don't have enough room on your shelf, maybe go for the digital versions. So I'll show you the backs of some stuff. Yo, look at that. Wolverine hanging out with Generation X because he and Jubilee are good friends. Oh, yo, it's the annual that was adapted from that one Generation X novel with the villain Despair, who's like, I'm gonna fucking make you all depressed. And Jono's like, haha, bitch, I'm always depressed. Predating the That's My Secret Cap, I'm Always Angry by like 15 years. And of course, the greatest part of Generation X, Jono fucking solos Omega Red. My man's sees Omega Red, a guy who gives Wolverine trouble, a guy that the Japanese love for some reason. Omega Red, as Wolverine says in that one episode of the anime. Shut up, that's how he says it. And then Jono just sees this guy, walks up and goes, I'll have to stand by my original assessment, mate. You're a loser. And it's like, fucking Omega Red just fucking is done. He's finished. It's over. It's fucking Jova, guys. He can't come back from this. My man's takes down Omega Red. He's so cool. I love this man so much. I love Emma Frost. I love this book. Also, yes, when I said husking, Paige like can rip her skin off, like sheds her skin to become different materials. So it's like Absorbing Man, but cooler. And that's me rambling about Generation X for 40 minutes. So I'll probably get it trimmed down to like 35. It's been neat. I'd like to do a bigger video on Generation X someday. I don't know what format I would do. All I've really thought of is just explaining what happens in the book. But I don't know how interesting that would be. But I still want to be big and comprehensive on it. Give me ideas. Maybe I'll find a format I really like if you have any ideas. Let me know if you want to see that wasted potential on how they did my boy dirty. My man's is a descendant of Apocalypse, and they did nothing with that. How do you do nothing with my man's being a descendant of Apocalypse? How do you do that? And I'd also like to explain why Emma Frost is like the perfect X-Men waifu when she's not being portrayed as helping Cyclops cheat on his wife. I like Cyclops, but fuck you, dude. I know it's Emma. I know it's Emma fucking Frost, but you don't cheat on Jean like that. Why is it with Scott and just cheat? I don't know what it is about Scott, right? I'm sorry, but every psychic mutant female is attracted to him. Emma, Jean, Madeline Pryor. Remember, she wasn't even a clone of Jean originally. Madeline Pryor, she was a separate person. Fucking Psylocke had a thing for him in the 90s. Why? And then he just goes and fucking cheats on them all. Like, he cheated on Madeline with Jean, cheated on Jean with Emma. What's next? Like, they all deserve better. You, Jean Grey, deserve better. So does this one. Scott, fuck you, bitch. Why is the most, like, wholesome and, like, actually long-lasting and successful relationship in X-Men somehow Gambit and Rogue? They got married. They got married. That happened. Oh yeah, Emma married Tony Stark. Take me back to the 90s. I don't want to be here anymore.